supper.
At this time, I'll call the meeting of the Marshall City Council to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. The City Council is meeting 30 minutes earlier this evening because of the precinct caucuses will be held this evening. So by state law, our meeting needs to be completed by 6 o'clock p.m. So we will conclude by that time. We have an agenda before us. Is there any item? Are there any items to add or delete to that agenda?
Move to approve agenda.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Amanda to approve the agenda. Stephen, we'll just have this as a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Okay, the first item then would be the, consider the approval of the minutes from the regular meeting that was held on February 13th. Council has the minutes. Are there any corrections?
Move to approve.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Jim to approve the minutes as they have been presented. We'll move to a vote. And we'll close the voting.
Did mine get up there?
We got everybody?
Did it twice.
And the motion does pass. Jim, you voted yes?
I did.
So motion passed unanimously. We'll move then to agenda item number 2. This is the South Whitney Street reconstruction project from East College Drive to Jean Avenue. We have 2 items to consider. First would be the resolution declaring the official intent regarding the reimbursement of the expenditures with the proceeds of tax-exempt bonds. And then following that would be the resolution that would accept the bid and award the contract. I'll call on Jason Anderson, City Engineer, Director of Public Works, to present this agenda item.
Thank you, Mayor. You've got the resolution included in the packet, which includes the tabulation of bids. We had a bid opening last week. We received 4 bids on February 22nd. The low bid was from D&G Excavating of Marshall in the amount of $1,565,706.60. This is below where our engineer's estimate was for the project. All bids were pretty close with each other within reason, and I think it speaks to a good understanding of the plans by all the contractors, which is good news for us. Including for 5% allowance for contingency and 16% engineering fees, the cost is a little over $1.9 million. All improvements would be assessed according to our special assessment policy, and that includes cost participation from the wastewater utility, surface water utility, and MMU. Staff would recommend to award the contract to D&G, and we can answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Are there any questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion on the first item in the resolution declaring the official intent regarding the reimbursement.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Motion by Amanda, seconded by C. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. And we'll close the voting. And the motion does pass. We'll note there's 1 abstention. So we'll move then to the consent agenda. We'll bring the items up on the screen that are on the consent agenda.
Do we have to?
Do we need to
Oh,
accept?
I'm sorry. The second item would be the resolution that it will accept the bid and award the contract. Any questions about this resolution?
I so move.
Motion by John. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by C. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. And we'll close the voting. Motion passes with 1 abstention. Now we'll move to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda this evening, consider approval of the license renewals for the garbage and refuse haulers, the Channel Parkway Addition Project, the introduction of the preliminary plat, chip sealing on various city streets, bituminous overlay, the authorization to advertise for bids, and then we'll note there that on the Halber Road, it's from Highway 59 to Marguerite, not, so that, just we'll note that correction in the description. So consider the resolution of support for Bioforge Marshall, which is the company is Solugen, to the Minnesota Forward Fund. Consider the resolution calling for a public hearing on the issuance of revenue bonds on behalf of Abira Health. Consider the resolution calling for a public hearing on the issuance of conduit revenue bonds on behalf of the Foundation for Innovation and Education to be leased to and operated by Southwest West Central Service Cooperative. And also finally on the consent agenda would be the approval of the bills and the project payments. Any item on the consent agenda any member of the council wants removed for purposes of separate discussion.
Number 8.
Number 3 and 5.
Okay. Any other item? If not, I will entertain a motion for the remaining items on the consent agenda, 4, 6, 7, 9, and 10.
Moved.
Motion by Steve, seconded by C. Discussion? If not, all in favor say, if not, we will move to a vote. And we'll close the voting. And the motion does pass. Agenda item 3, consider the approval of the license renewals for the garbage and refuse hauler. Jim?
Just, maybe something we should consider as we get 3 of these folks in town, and I'm not against competition, but garbage trucks are really, really hard on our alleys. Do we maybe start looking at limiting areas, different parts of the city, because we could potentially have 5 trucks up an alley in one weekend. It would be recycling, then 3 garbage trucks, and they go back and forth. Just something to consider, because they do really rip up alleys.
Yeah, that's a point to note, certainly.
So it's just something I think we could think of in the future if we have other people come. So I'll make a motion to approve it.
Motion by Jim, is there a second? Second by John, discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. And we'll close the voting. And the motion passes. Number 5, agenda, chip sealing on various city streets.
I just don't think it's cost effective, so I just want to oppose it.
Okay. Any other discussion on number 5? And it is your recommendation as Director of Public Works.
It is.
I would entertain a motion.
I so move.
Motion by John, is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Amanda, discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. And we'll close the voting. And the motion does pass. I think that this is also, Jim, a topic to discuss further at Public Improvement and Transportation Committee in the future. This is also, there's various studies. MnDOT is, has had various positions on this, so it's a legitimate thing to talk about. So
Jason and we've had extensive conversations about this. So we have done that. From what I see, I don't believe it's cost effective, but Jason and I talk about this every year. Every year we spend a couple hours talking about it before it comes to the council.
Yeah, I did want to say that too. I should have said that when you offered me a chance to speak. We have spoken about it at PIT committee, and we have for the last few years, and we'll continue to have those conversations. And conversely, we understand the concerns from Councilmember Lozinski and others, Meister, and even you, Mayor Burns. I know we've had these conversations. We'll continue to monitor the best research available and try to make the best recommendation we can.
Yeah, and the other discussion, while would be even more cost, is fog sealing it afterwards to seal in the rock so they don't end up getting scraped off right away. And the downside of that is that the road is out of service for probably a day, so.
And we had a conversation about grading streets too, and I think, Jason, you explained that you had a bad batch one year. We did something different one year, and it wasn't as successful as it has been in the past.
Yeah, unfortunately with the seal coating, you do sometimes have a year where it doesn't turn out how you'd like. It's so dependent on weather conditions, humidity, recent rainfall, quality of the aggregate. And we did have one year where we didn't get good adherence. We have had some years where we've had very good adherence, and we know that when we get that a good application, it is prolonging the life of our streets, especially if it's a pavement that's in really good condition.
So it's a worthy topic.
And it is discussed as a public, if they would join us at PINT, we're more than welcome, but we have this discussion every year. That's a good discussion.
So we'll move then to agenda item number 8. This is the calling for the public hearing on the issuance of revenue bonds for Avera Health. Steve?
I just, as an employee, I just thought I should abstain from it, so
Okay.
that's why I pulled it.
Very good. So I would entertain a motion on agenda item number 8.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Jim, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. And we'll close the voting. And the motion passes with one abstention. That brings us to agenda item number 11. The wastewater items, we have 2 items here. First is an update on the MPDES permit. And then secondly, consider the authorization to utilize wastewater funds to continue the water softener rebate program. So we'll start with Jason Anderson, and then you can introduce Scott as you see fit. So,
Thank you, Mayor Burns. I will introduce Scott right away for this item. Scott Trudson, our wastewater plant superintendent. He'll come up and he's got a PowerPoint to walk through with us, and we can answer some questions.
while you're walking up, Scott, congratulations to you as well as Scott Prisbilla for receiving the city award on the, what is that called? The UROC award.
Yeah,
So-
thank you.
For your-
Really appreciate that.
And it's, the award was presented not only for both of your work at the wastewater plant and your leadership out there, but specifically on the chloride reduction project. So
Thank you.
that's what you'll give us an update on.
All right. Well, thank you, Mayor and Council. I'd like to give you a little update from the wastewater department. First update is about our MPDS discharge permit. We've been working with the MPCA for just about 2 years now on the details of the renewal. There are some new limits included in that. This is kind of a refresher. I've talked about it before, but sulfates is one of the items. They're giving us a new limit of 968 milligram per liter, which we can't currently reach. The city did ask for and received a 15-year variance, or schedule of compliance to that. So it'll give us time to work on source reduction. Basically, we'll have benchmark goals, annual reports, and we'll be working with our SIU, our industries, on that. Phosphorus is not a new limit for us, but there are more stringent requirements for June through September. Currently, we can meet the proposed limit, but in order to move forward, we're going to have to make some upgrades to our failing effluent filter systems, probably as soon as 2027. Our effluent filters are traveling bridges. They were put in 2002, and the technology was never designed to remove the level of solids that are necessary to keep the phosphorus limits down. A facility plan will need to be done to find the most cost-effective way of meeting this in the future. Chlorides, back in 2014, the city did receive a limit of 261 milligram per liter, but milligram per liter chlorides. We did get a 10-year schedule of compliance net, which comes due actually on April 1st of 2024. Because we can't meet that yet, we asked for a 10-year variance. The variance will require reduction work, benchmark goals, and reports. Current stage, the EPA needed to approve our request for the variance for the chlorides before the MPCA could issue our new permit. On February 1st, MPCA let me know that the EPA did approve it, and they're currently working on issuing our permit. New permit will become effective March 1st, this Friday, which is good. Because of the new limits, we are currently updating all significant industrial user agreements. water softener rebate program.
Before you move on to the water softener, and you probably mentioned this, but could you say again the length of time for that permit?
Permits are 5-year permits, yep. The last one we had in 2014 expired in 2019, and we applied for a new permit, but the MPCA was running behind, so it took up until now to get the new one issued, so,
Yeah, thank you.
yep. Second part to update you on is the water softener rebate program. This is just some of the work that we've done. We've done a lot of advertising, utilizing Marshall Independent, Marshall Radio, Chamber of Commerce, social media, and then utility bill inserts. Mailings, staff at wastewater mailed out 140 letters, basically aiming at property owners. Emails, we contacted industry, schools, churches, the hospital, and then just right down to door knocking. I mean, we went out last year a lot, some apartment complexes, hotels, car washes, restaurants, SMSU, local retailers to get the word out. Participation, these numbers are actually, since I put this together last week, we've actually had some more people turn in rebates. Removals was the one thing that really took off. We had a lot of rental landlords that just removed them, which is you can't get much better than not having a water softener when it comes to chlorides. Optimizations, 82. That's maybe a little bit understated because there were optimizations done before the program that the water softener professionals just did and didn't apply for a rebate. Contractor replacements, 85, that's probably more like 90 now. And then do-it-yourself, a lot of do-it-yourselfers, well, 10 people, I guess not a lot, but they were done too, so. Has it solved our chloride problem? Not yet, but it's certainly helping. Next slide, we've got a graph here of the effluent chlorides. That's the number we're looking at, starting back in 2015 and then going all the way to current January of 2024. You can see the linear line there. It starts out about 625 milligram per liter, and now we're down probably about 350, 360, kind of in that range. The top line is our new 468 milligram per liter interim limit. That's what we got for 10 years with the chloride variance. The bottom is the 261 where we have to get to, so that gives us a little breathing room. You can see the vertical line, that's when the water plant upgrade went online. The ups and downs, we have industries that struggle with chlorides. They're working on it. They've gotten better. Actually, we're going to be speaking with all our significant industrial users in the next couple of weeks, and this will be one of the topics.
Scott, can I ask a question on
Go
this?
ahead.
On that graph, how much of the decline is related to water softener changes?
That's a good question. I mean, if you look at the participation numbers compared to the population of town, it's not fantastic, but I think there's people that have done changes that weren't part of the program. As far as industrial, I know we've got one industry that's really been working hard at that actually too, and they're making some headway with it, so.
And
Getting
Scott, would
closer.
it be safe to say the two double bottoms where there's a significant lowering that coincided with heavy rainfall events?
Yes, yep, and that's something else I should mention is a good point. It's a dilution it's a concentration limit, not a mass limit. By that I mean when we get a lot of water in, our numbers go down. And you could probably correlate a lot of those to rain events. You know, we do get some I&I, which of course dilutes it. So this has really been a good test for us because it's been dry this last year, which makes it tougher to meet the limit, but at least shows us maybe where the bottom is. So.
Thank you.
Yep. What I want to ask about tonight is, should we continue this program? Current program was funded mainly by an MPCA grant with some matching funds from the wastewater budget. Program started on July 5th of 2022 and ended when grant funds ran out today. So basically, we just went through all the money as of today. Now that the grant funds are depleted, we would like to continue the program utilizing dedicated funds currently in the wastewater budget. The program could also continue in future years at a more limited wastewater budgeted item. Any questions?
Questions for Scott or input on the question he's asking us?
I know this is probably an impossible question to answer, but how many softeners do you guys assume are in the city of Marshall? 1,000, 1,500?
That's a good question. You know, I
Because it
suppose
seems
you
like
could look.
82 is just the top of the iceberg.
Right, right. It's a good question. I suppose you could calculate it by looking at how many households there are, but then there was commercial ones out there too. I know there was a couple large commercial ones. One of our industries, actually, we told them this was coming, and they had a system that was, going to need replacement. They held off and just removed it, so there's that. Yeah, I guess I don't know how many softeners are in town. Pretty hard to tell.
I think, Councilman, if I may, I think there's thousands of them, and that's kind of a purpose for us asking to continue this program is to help continue to keep this end of the chloride issue kind of handled by having a continual rebate program available to help make sure that people want to replace their water softeners, because most individuals, we don't think to replace our water softener. It's not a very exciting home renovation project. So by having that available and helping to take a bite out of that cost, we think it'll be effective in getting people to remove them. When we opened it up to DIY very recently, that's when we started to see a lot more momentum again for the program. So we think that having a local rebate without as many requirements as the MPCA has could be a very good thing.
So that was really my question, is twofold. Your sense is that there must be a continued demand, and operating it locally and absolutely internally will be more efficient than having to do the reporting back to MPCA.
Sure, we can do a little more streamlined. We're already talking
Right.
about that, taking out some of the things that were required in the MPCA legacy grant and streamlining it for us. I should mention too that we have done limited testing of residential areas, picked a lift station that serves just a residential area, and then do samples just to see how the chloride level varies, and it does, and you can tell that's people's softeners are generating. It's still some of the rebates we get, and you see what some of the salt people were using in a month compared to what they do now. It's an eye opener. So
Okay. Any other questions?
Correction. Scott, are you able to reach out to like Eco Water where they sell water softeners and figure out like if they have people who have old ones and have them send out letter to the
yes,
owners?
yep, we've worked closely with Culligan and Eco Water and Roger DeMuth in his system, and Corias too. So we've worked with all of them on it, and they've been very helpful, obviously. And like Jason said, the do-it-yourself, we went through and looked at all the softeners that you can purchase locally in town and made sure they all can meet the requirements, and they do. So
And then how have you reached out to the citizens here that don't speak English?
we did have Spanish. We've got a Spanish, actually in the flyers that we put out, we do put a blurb in Spanish on there to call us. Jasmine Meza at work is fluent in Spanish, so that helps. We did have some forums in Spanish, although we didn't have anybody use those. Other languages, that's a good comment.
Yeah, because I know there's the Korean church and maybe they might be, you can go on their Sunday service and have the announce it to their churchgoers there
Right,
too.
right, that's a good point.
Yeah, because
We
there's
can
a
maybe-
lot of Korean homeowners
Sure,
now.
sure, that's a good idea.
Yeah. That's it. That's all I have. I'm rolling you.
I just want to comment, the city has never taken a position of not having water softeners in homes. And I know that was something that MMU talked about too, but if you look at Department of Health, they still recommend softening if it's greater than 7 grains per hardness, which we're really close, right? I think we're at 8. So we're almost there to maybe saying you don't need them, but not quite.
Right. And it depends on the individual. There's people that just turn them off and get rid of them, and they're happy. And then there's other people that notice it if it's not down to that 0. So it's really a personal
Yeah.
choice.
Any other questions? If not, your request is for a continuation of the rebate program using internal funds.
Yes, yeah.
And dedicated wastewater funds.
And we would request that we consider refunding the program at an annual basis at time of fee resolution.
So that's the request. Any input on the request?
I'll make a motion to approve the request. I think it's a good request.
I would second.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Amanda. Discussion?
I think it's a great request. I just wonder where the money's going to come from since we're short and looking at that. So where are we going to get the money to pay for this? One idea that I have, we don't know how many softeners we have. That's hypothetical. We estimate, maybe a guesstimate. Has anybody ever thought of getting a grant from the EPA or someplace and having the college do some kind of a survey on finding exactly how many softeners we have? If you find out who has the softeners, and we can target it
Sure. Yeah.
and say, have you done it? There's no penalty. We're just hand the people who have the softeners the rebate form, talk to them, educate them, and say, this will really help. And if the MPCA wants us to do that, if they're requiring this, if the EPA is requiring this, they should have money to help us figure out how to get there. Otherwise, it's an unfunded Band-Aid that's a great idea, but good luck.
And that's a fair point. That's part of what we do too when we have these meetings with the MPCA is kind of emphasize that all of these things cost money and we'd like to help and support. And they have, right? We did have a $7 million grant to do the water softening project at the water plant, which was a state grant. And the program that we're just completing now was an MPCA grant program to hand out these rebates. And we did try to use a lot of the funding to do radio ads, newspaper ads, bill stuffers. I think it'd be pretty hard to say that we didn't make a very good effort to educate. We just assume that almost every property has a water softener because they do. And we don't want to, as Sharon had mentioned, we don't want to discourage water softeners. We just want to encourage them to be operating effectively and at the most efficient settings as possible. So we hope that this funding source will help do that. And this is all wastewater utility funds that would be proposed to be used.
And I think this is a less intrusive way of doing it. I know there's communities, I believe, that they inspect houses when they sell for softeners and other things to make sure that they're up to par. So we're trying, I believe this is much less intrusive than being forced to inspect houses. That even came up at one point during this discussion when we could get our numbers down, if I remember correctly. And I'd rather not. I don't think that's way overstepping our bounds, but at some point they're going to make us get this number down there.
That is correct. And, we have, as Scott indicated in his presentation, we've already had a 10-year schedule of compliance. Now we've got a 10-year variance. There is some uncertainty on how many times you can keep getting a variance, right? The idea is that in 10 years, you're meeting this limit. So we think that this program helps us contain the residential and light commercial side of it. And Scott and his team have spent countless hours on the industrial side of it and trying to work with our industrial partners and our heavier users and chloride sources to make reductions. And you see that in that graph, right, where you see those numbers coming down. That didn't just happen. That was through a ton of outreach by Scott and his team. And so we just think that this is a good program to help with the one side of the equation while Scott and his team help with the other side.
So when you look 10 years down, when this variance is out, or 14 as the case may be, if they get behind again, then what? Because if we don't get the variance and they hammer you and say, Marshall, you're out of compliance, what's the potential downfall of that? That's a hypothetical thing. We don't know what the government will be at that time. We don't know what the fines, but they could potentially come down and hammer us with fines as a city.
Correct.
Well, ultimately, that's more taxes too. So
The way the city can meet this is through reverse osmosis of our water leaving our wastewater plant. But the cost of that is astronomical. So that's something to think about when you're talking about funding this program. The funding of this is going to be very minor compared to what a reverse osmosis system for our wastewater plant would be. So
thank you.
Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote on the motion. Those close the voting. The motion does pass. Agenda item number 12 is the Lion Street Reconstruction Project. The action before us is to consider the resolution receiving the feasibility report and calling for a hearing on the improvement. Once again, Jason.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a project we've talked about with the council over the last few years. It's been included in the CIP. This year, I think, after holding some meetings and getting recommendations, we're continuing the process of moving this forward. And we'd like the council to consider receiving the feasibility report, which you have in the packet, and then calling for this public hearing. This is a complete reconstruction of Lions Circle, the curb and street and driveways. In the memo, we do say water main extension, but through current communication with MMU, they might do that work in advance of this project. So then it would be sanitary sewer replacement in addition to the street work and the surface water work, the catch basins and stormwater piping. So this is it's a project estimated right now in our CIP at just under $300,000. All improvements would be proposed to be assessed in accordance with our current policy. I can answer any questions if we have them, but staff would like to go ahead and call this public hearing. I would note that we did invite property owners to a public informational meeting already. We did not have attendance at that meeting. We've since started an effort of trying to communicate more directly with the property owners further, and then of course they'll get this notice as well to come to the council hearing.
Okay, very good. Questions for Jason?
This came through PIET, and PIET supported this. I believe this is a single worst street that we have in town. And I think we had that discussion. It's gravel. So it is overdue.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Jim, seconded by John. Discussion? We'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting. And the motion passes. Move then to Commission Board Liaison Reports. Steve?
I had the EDA meeting, but I was stuck at work and unable to go, so Amanda gets to take it.
I think the biggest thing that came from that meeting was the East College Drive grants are now finally being distributed, making progress, and we'll start seeing some improvements. Planning Commission also met last week, and we discussed what we already passed in the consent agenda, the preliminary plat for Channel Parkway, and there were not any concerns.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, from my part, the Fire Relief Association had their annual meeting earlier this month. The Relief Association, which provides the retirement benefits for the firefighters, it stands at just under $2.5 million, so it is fully funded. There was withdrawals this past year for, I believe, 3 retirements, and that totaled $408,000, nearly $409,000. The return on the fund, because a substantial amount of the funds are invested in equities, the total return on the fund was 13.58% this past year. So a good return on the fund. It provides a very good benefit for the firefighters and those that stay with it till they're fully vested. It is a nice retirement and an incentive, and it's one of those incentives that can be used for recruiting firefighters. Secondly, the Southwest Regional Development Commission did meet this past, 2 weeks ago. One of the things to report is that SRDCs around the state did receive funding to help communities with grant writing. It's a 3-year funding. It was provided by the 2023 legislature. And then there's some companion funding that was also provided by one of the foundations in Minnesota. And the specific purpose of this is for the federal IIJA and IRA funding. So those were passed by Congress in 2022, but many communities, and I would include our community in that, find it challenging to take advantage of some of those funding opportunities because either there's not the capacity to dedicate time to do a complex grant application. We just don't, most communities in our region just don't have that level of staffing to be able to free up staff to write those grants. So that's what this funding would do, is to provide that grant writing, and it's also free of charge. So a lot of these things are for public works, but there are some other avenues too. So just wanted to make the council and staff aware that there is that resource in the region. So, and it starts now. The federal fiscal year ends in October, but this goes through the state. So the first year of funding is available until June 30th for grant writing. Then there's 2 more years, and there's approximately just under $100,000 available per year for grant writing. Okay, John?
Nothing.
C?
Nothing.
And Jim?
Nothing,
Okay. Then we'll move to individual items. Jim?
nothing today.
Nothing.
C? John? Steve?
I have nothing, Mr. Mayor.
And Amanda?
I don't have anything either.
That, we're doing good on time, so we'll move to staff reports. Sharon?
Just 2 really quick items. Follow-up from EDA. One other discussion that wasn't really on the agenda but got brought up was childcare needs. We did have a business representative approach our EDA director and the chamber director about exploring the need. And we invited Southwest Initiative Foundation. And I think we're going to look at this again. I know it was looked at in 2017 and a little bit more recently with the school district and their daycare that they decided to not move forward with. And so you'll see some additional work in that area coming up soon. And one other thing I'll just mention, our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Commission is going to do strategic planning. I know Councilmember Mulesky mentioned this at the last meeting. We have a first session scheduled in April. And I do think some of the things that get mentioned over time, like translation services, that was mentioned for rental code too. How do we communicate with our diverse populations? Could be a worthy goal for the city. Currently, we don't have the resources. We don't have the talent either in some of those areas. It doesn't work necessarily to just use Google to interpret into these different languages. You really have to have someone who knows the language and the different dialects. So, yeah, just continuing and working on those items. So that's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
And we should add, and I should have done this, but I believe the council received an email from Lauren Dietz, EDA Director, late this afternoon about the Soyagen Bioforge groundbreaking that will be held on April 11th. So I believe they're starting to do groundwork now, so the ground will be well broken by that time. Jason?
I'll build on the rental theme here and just update the council that letters were sent out to folks that may have rental properties. We obviously don't know where all the rentals are, but we made an effort to contact people. We are taking registration applications now at this time, and there are some individuals taking advantage of that and getting on top of it right away. So we appreciate that. Ask for everyone's patience while we work through all the bugs and gremlins and glitches of starting a new program. But I know the phones have been very busy, and Carla, Ilya, some others on the team have been really busy taking these registration questions. So that's all I have.
Okay, any questions for Jason? Pam?
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
We have the remaining items on the agenda that include the information items, Public Housing Commission minutes, the building permits, as well as the listing of upcoming meetings. Is there anything further to come forward at this meeting this evening? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Amanda to adjourn. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting. Motion passes. We are adjourned.